I wanted you to just maybe talk about the thought of sustainability around words. Earlier, I was being asked how has the public world of words become corrosive and toxic and poisonous. I was just thinking, for instance, the way we describe people. Let's take America right now. We'll come back to India. But the way Americans would describe Native Americans, the people, the original inhabitants of America, was as savages. And when you call someone a savage, you can just kill them and it doesn't matter, But today, when you call them Native Americans or indigenous people, then you are interested in their knowledge system. You are guilty for having killed off entire people as savage. When you call people anti-national, you don't need to know why they are upset. You can just call them anti-national and put them in jail. So that's the power of words. So I want to come back to you, Shashi, in your public life. And, these are students who are going to now who are going to shape public life and the future of India. How would you interpret the power of sustainability and relate it to words and what's going on in our public life?
Well, look, words are always linked to context, I'm sorry to say. The same thing that if I say to some of you in a conversation in the living room may be understood or heard differently by a mass audience. In fact, I think I'll tell a story against myself because you're familiar with this famous episode when in my very first year, my first months in politics, I was asked during the government's declaration of an austerity drive by a journalist in writing on the social media Twitter, Mr. Minister, does this mean you will travel cattle class? Now, the expression cattle class is very familiar to me and apparently also to the journalist because I'd been living in America for the preceding 3 decades where cattle class is routinely used not to disparage the passengers, but to disparage the airlines for herding us all in like cattle. And what did I do? I replied with sort of typical Stephanian wit. I said, yes, I will travel in cattle class out of solidarity with all our holy cows. Now, I said that and went off to Liberia and Africa on an official visit. It took me 24 hours to get there. And in the meantime, apparently, the dung hit the fan in India. Everyone, even in my own party, was denouncing me and accusing me of elitism and worse, of disparaging economy class passengers as cattle, which, of course, is not what I had meant. I was just using a routine phrase. But what was interesting was that I remembered at that point Shakespeare's famous line, that the success of a jest lies not in the tongue of the teller, but in the ear of the hearer, which is that when you say something, whatever your intention may be, all that matters is what people think they've heard or are led to believe they've heard. And the result was, especially once the expression cattle class, which is common in idiomatic English, was translated into multiple Indian languages, it really came across as if it was some snooty, sneering fellow insulting the ordinary voters. It taught me a very powerful lesson. A, that words have a power to really hurt, even when no hurt is intended. B, that you have to be careful in Indian public life about the words you use because we're a multilingual polity and words can be translated. And also, of course, that there are people who might enjoy and relish distorting the meaning of what you were trying to say. So you've got to be careful. That's certainly been a very sobering wake-up call in political life, to know that you must sometimes say something differently from the way you might casually do amongst friends who would use the same language. It's very different when you unleash your words politically on a large, vast, and complicated public.
Talk to us about your life, because you've also seen lots of ups and downs. The word resilience, what does that really mean for you, and what is your own source of resilience when you faced a lot of difficult times?
Yeah, that's a very important question, Shoma, because every child in this hall is going to grow up and one day experience some setbacks, because there is no human being who hasn't gone through setbacks. The important thing is not how you actually deal, and not what you experience by way of a setback. It is how you deal with it, how you bounce back, how you recover, how you actually use your setback to strengthen you for the journey ahead, because there is always a journey ahead. That resilience is so important. I think many children certainly in my school days would have read the story of Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king, who lost 6 times but kept on trying and finally won on the 7th attempt. That sort of story is often told as, never give up kind of message. I remember my former boss, the UN Secretary General, the late UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who went through a very, very torrid time when he was attacked on the so-called oil for food program, and a lot of false accusations were levied at him. Very unfairly. He was a great, good, decent, compassionate human being who had won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was being described and treated almost like a criminal. And he was very, very hurt, but he managed to hold it within himself. And I asked him about his resilience, and he said, my father taught me a Ghanaian proverb, which says, when the sharks bite you, do not bleed. And I said, Kofi, I don't understand. When the sharks bite you, you'll bleed. How can you not bleed? He said, one day you will understand what he meant. You have to experience it yourself. And then I came into Indian politics, and I found myself undergoing exactly the same experience of being attacked and accused of nameless, unimaginable crimes that I could not possibly have even dreamt of committing, let alone committing. And it was really shocking for me to see this kind of widespread thing. And that's when Kofi Annan's resilience came back to me and those words. And suddenly I understood what he meant. The sharks bite you to get the satisfaction of watching you bleed. If you show them you are suffering, they have won. They have actually succeeded in penetrating who you are. But if you have a clear conscience, you know who you are, you know what you have done and not done, the best thing you can do is not to bleed when they bite you, to show them that they cannot succeed in deterring you from your course of action. Continue writing, continue making speeches, continue doing your work, in my case, in my constituency, and ultimately truth will prevail, as indeed it did in my case, when a judge threw out all these false charges. But what was very satisfying to me was that when those sharks bit me, I didn't reveal what I was going through, the pain I was suffering. I didn't bleed for that.
But Shashi, I want you to talk about just one other thing before I open it up and let the students also interact with you. Is another situation where resilience would matter. This is a situation when you're being attacked for something you haven't done. But in all our lives, there will be times when you actually have made a mistake. You've made an error in judgment. You've done something which has blown up in your life, in whatever scale that might be. In school, it may just be something you've done. You've cheated or you've hurt a friend. How does resilience operate in that situation, and how would you interpret resilience then?
I think that the ability to admit to yourself when you have done wrong is the first thing. Normally people tend to get defensive. Somebody attacks you and says you've done something wrong. Your immediate thing is to defend yourself and find an excuse. Learn sometimes to admit that you have been wrong, that you can be wrong, indeed that everybody can be wrong. Admit your mistake and vow to yourself not to make the same mistake again. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think turn to the person you have wronged, if you can, if that person is willing to listen to you, and apologize. I've always believed in the power of apology. To show somebody that you are seriously sorry about something, you go to them and say, look, I did wrong, I'm sorry, it'll never happen again, please forgive me. The person may not forgive you, may not want to listen to you, may not want to, but at least give it a try. Most people, I would say, speaking for myself, most people will be understanding and will excuse you. And finally, show through your actions that you really regret the mistake, not only by never doing it again, but by taking extra care to ensure that you do the opposite of what you did wrong, whatever it was. All the examples you gave. If you've cheated once, don't cheat again. If you've stolen something, I hope it will be something small, that you will return it and don't do it again. If you've hurt somebody with your words, not only should you undo it, but you should go out of your way to say nice words to them. It seems to me that these are not difficult things for each of us. If we really vow to ourselves that for us, it's more important to be a better human being than to worry about how it will look that we have actually had to bow ourselves before somebody we wronged.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste. What's your name?
My name is Saifana, sir. I'm from grade 9.
Hi, Saifana.
Sir, I would like to know what is the concept behind Tharoorism and how would it reflect in your approach to communication?
I think Tharoorisms are meant to be a joke by people who don't like me very much, teasing me about my language. That every time somebody uses a big word, they call it a Tharoorism. Sometimes it can be done in good spirit. There was a meme going around once that even I enjoyed, which said, I used to think I was poor. Then I met Shashi Tharoor and I realized I'm impecunious. Which is actually a clever way of saying, impecunious means the same thing as being poor. But the implication is that if I met Shashi Tharoor, he uses a long word for it. That was a good joke. But they're often very silly things which are nothing really to do with me. Somebody says some sort of very stupid, sort of lengthy greeting for Diwali using huge, huge words and says, oh, Shashi Tharoor just wished me for Diwali. Well, I'm sorry, I wouldn't wish them that way. I wish them happy Diwali or have a wonderful festival of lights. But the truth is that that's what they do, and they call it a Tharoorism. It's not. Just using big words without meaning is not a Tharoorism. For me, if there is a Tharoorism, it is about actually using words to communicate your thoughts effectively.
Namaste, sir. I am
Namaste.
Jyotika of
Hi,
grade
Jyotika.
10. Yeah, and I'd like to ask, how do you respond to critics who say your vocabulary is too alienating?
Well, I think if it were really the way they portray it, it might well be alienating. But most of the time, as I just said, I like to be understood. Otherwise, I wouldn't be effective in what I do. Believe me, if I alienated people all the time, I wouldn't have been elected 4 times to Parliament, and my books wouldn't sell to readers. So I would really fail at what I've actually succeeded at. So I would hope that means that I haven't alienated as many people as my critics think I have.
Sir, you've given your speeches in a lot of prestigious institutions and all of that, but not everybody knows that you've tried your hand in stand-up as well, which was incredibly amazing. But how did you convince yourself to get onto the stage and try stand-up comedy, though? And how did your knowledge of words help you there with that as well?
I'm a bit of a risk taker, I must admit. The first invitation to stand-up comedy came when I think Amazon Prime was doing a special where they wanted to quote unquote invite celebrities to pair up with established comics and do stand-up comedy. And they invited 5 or 6 people. There was an actress, there was some, I think, fashion designer, there were sort of people in different professions. They invited me as the politician. I'm afraid the others didn't seem to work out very well because I certainly haven't heard about them ever again. But mine kind of went viral and it's still there out on Amazon Prime. And I said yes because it was that very safe period that happens between the casting of the votes and the counting of them. This was the 2019 elections. So you don't know whether you won or lost, and you are at a loose end. You're not. You're still the MP, but with no real responsibility since you can't do anything, and you're not yet sure whether you won or lost. So you feel slightly irresponsible. And I said, let's do this and let's try it. But I had a lot of fun doing it. Some professional comics helped me. And at the end of it, I think I did about slightly, maybe 1.5 times more than they actually broadcast. All the very political jokes that were also perhaps they felt less desirable after Mr. Modi's thumping victory, they deleted. But most of what they kept were the non-political ones, and those were quite amusing, I hope, and you can still find it on Amazon. Then, when I was at the Jaipur Literary Festival a couple of years later, there'd been a long hiatus at COVID. During COVID, and the Jaipur Literary Festival at the British Library resumed immediately after COVID in 2022 or 23, I can't remember now, 22, I think. They asked me, 22, they asked me whether I would do a stand-up comedy to end the whole festival with. So I did one about the whole COVID experience and about being in London because it was the British edition of the festival. And that is also available more freely on YouTube. You don't have to be a member of Amazon Prime for that. But I'm not going to do this too often, Shelley. My position is very clear. Rarity makes it more appreciated, right? So if I do it too often, it'll become, they say in Hindi, "Ghar ki murgi dal barabar." It's the chicken you see in the house all the time is just like routinely having dal. That's what the Hindi walas say. So I don't want my jokes to become routine.
Namaste, sir. I'm Lakshna from grade 11.
Hi, Lakshna. Okay. Big girl.
So I have a question for you. Your words have impacted a lot of people. How has others' words impacted you, or their words or their comments made an impact on you?
Yeah, I was just talking about the impact that some of those writers made on me. Woodhouse certainly taught me the great importance of words, of how to use words effectively. Not just the actual words you use, but the way you arrange them, the way a sentence begins, ends. All of those have an impact. The way the use of language to evoke hilarity or humor or laughter in a reader is no small feat, and that I got from Woodhouse. I've rarely had time to read thrillers in later life, but as a youth, I read a lot of thrillers, and one of the things you learn from thrillers is how to end a chapter in such a way that a reader wants to go on to the next chapter. Many of these thriller writers, Agatha Christie or any of them, James Hadley Chase, there's so many of them, they are masters of the art of hooking you and keeping you hooked by making sure each chapter ends at some exciting point and you want to read on to find out what happens next. That's a very good trick of writing.
I just wanted to convey this as more through this session of yours. All these youngsters are seldom smiling, but as Shoma said beautifully, you keep smiling in your ups and downs. I've been seeing this. What are the small techniques, one or two techniques you will tell this young crowd here, the youngsters, the students of this future India, great India, how to keep smiling and be successful?
Well, first, I think, is to believe in yourself. If you have faith that you know what you are and that you will not let others define you by their accusations and criticisms, you will define yourself. You are the owner, the master of who you are. That is the first and most important conviction you must have in your life. Secondly, to be anchored in yourself. That is that not only must you know who you are, you must be rooted in that and try not to let yourself down. I think some of the people who try and fail may be trying to do things they're really not equipped to do. Not everyone can win the 100-meter dash. Not everyone can come first in the maths exam. Not everyone can sing a beautiful solo recital. Each one of us has different talents. Sometimes we may have more than one talent. Sometimes we may have, but we all have some talent or the other. Our talent might simply be that of bringing a smile to the face of the person next to us, of providing a shoulder to a suffering person to lean on. Whatever those talents are, know your talents and strengths and develop them to the fullest and be true to yourself. If you never let yourself down, you will find you don't let the world down either.
Hi, sir. Dr. Kannan Girish. I had met you when you were HRD minister, and we had a lot of conversations at that time. So my question is very simple. When you were a HRD minister, you had a lot of initiatives you wanted to do, and a lot of nice things you had spoken about. Today we have the National Education NEP has come. Now the National Curriculum Framework has also come. What is your opinion about the current system of education right now? Is it what you had envisioned when you were HRD minister that's happening right now? And second question is, if there's something that you would love to change or something that you would love to add on to today's system, what would that be? Thank you.
That's a vast subject, Dr. Kannan. I think we'll have to have a whole different session for this. It's impossible to give you a superficial answer because the issues are so complex. To begin with, the national education policy affects both school education and college education. And I think some of the reforms in college education are actually quite welcome, particularly adding flexibility, allowing students to take multiple courses. There's a lot there that I like. In school education, there's some things I welcome and some things I'm very concerned about. I'm not at all satisfied with the idea of getting Anganwadi workers to teach literacy because many of the Anganwadi workers are not particularly educated themselves by definition. I'm not at all happy about the decision to allow schools to share facilities with schools up to a 30-kilometer radius away, because in practice, no school that doesn't have a playground is going to take their children to a playground 30 kilometers away every day. It won't happen, and this will just be a paper exercise to allow schools to function without adequate standards. Then there are some facilities which sound good on paper, but I worry about the practice. For example, when the Prime Minister says a child should be able to learn music and mathematics at the same school, probably true. But remember that mathematics, you need a mathematics teacher and a blackboard and a standard textbook. But music, you will need a music room or rooms. You will need different teachers with different instruments. You will need different people who can actually impart the right skills. And all that costs money. Who's going to pay for it? Is the government going to raise its budget sufficiently to subsidize all these innovations? Or are we going to make education more and more confined to the rich, where the parents will have to subsidize all this extra education because the schools will simply pass on the extra costs to the parents? And I worry about all of that because I want education to be of excellent quality, and it would be wonderful if every school could offer both music and mathematics. But then government must help provide some of the resources for all of this so that people are able to get benefits of all these enlightened innovations and actually benefit from them. But this is a very thin and superficial reading of a much more larger topic. We'll have to have a separate seminar on that one day, Mr. Kannan. I'll come back to all of you one day, maybe next year for all of that.